Hi there, you are listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name's Matt Wakeling. Thank you so much for joining me for episode number 142. Now, I hope you're keeping safe and well wherever you are. Today, I'm joined by Sydney-based guitarists and brothers, Zane Banks and Jai Perrybanks. They are two of the most electrifying young guitar players in Australia right now. These brothers tell of a musically rich upbringing and subsequent careers in the music industry. Working both together and individually, these guys are in high demand and get across many styles such as country, western swing, jazz, rock, blues, pop, art music, lots and lots of stuff. Zane attained his PhD through the Conservatorium of Music in Sydney, researching the use of electric guitar in contemporary art music. He premiered Ingwe, the solo electric guitar work composed by Georges Lentz, and he won the ABC Limelight Newcomer of the Year award in 2011. Jai completed a Masters in Tuba performance, also at the Sydney Con, before throwing himself into learning the pedal steel guitar. He's now highly in demand, working with Charlie Collins, Kasey Chambers, Julian and many other artists. Jai is also a Fender artist. This was a really great conversation, covering a lot of ground from making a career in Sydney, especially during the current climate, picking up gigs, learning new instruments, new styles, gear, all sorts of stuff. Let's jump straight in. Jai Banks and the Dr. Zane Banks, welcome to the Guitar Speak podcast.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks so much, man.
Man, I've been looking forward to this. I was just saying before hitting red, I don't think I've met a pair of guitarists quite like you guys who are just so equally steeped in contemporary art music, but also country jazz and all its various intersections and offshoots and folk music. And without doubt, the pair of you are the best dressed guitar players in Australia.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
Absolutely. So I think we just need to go back. What on earth was going on at home musically for you guys?
There was a lot of it. A lot of it. Like, Mum and Dad met when they were studying classical music at the Conservatorium of Sydney.
Okay.
And then were music teachers and musicians. They still, pre-COVID, they still used to perform, even though they're retired. So there was just all types of music that was on at home. And right from, earliest days, I can remember either the radio or Joni Mitchell, Crosby, Stills and Nash, or they would take us to see The Rite of Spring at the Opera House. So we had a bit of a head start with that sort of the music thing, which was definitely helpful.
And I think just having stuff lying around the house, there'd be harmonicas lying around the house, so we'd share our saliva. Zane would blow on the harmonica, and then I'd be like, "Oh, that looks great," I'm going to use the same one. You know what I mean? Just always guitars laying about, so it was very accessible just to be able to, get your hands on an instrument, which probably a lot of kids don't have. So we're quite privileged, I suppose, to have that opportunity.
Sure. And what are your parents playing? Or what, pre-COVID, what were your parents gigging? What's their main instruments and current musical output?
Yeah.
My parents both studied piano at the con.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my mum did voice as well. But when they would just play in bands, because they used to play in a blues band before we were born, my mum would play bass in that band and sing. And my dad was on keys playing a Wurlitzer and a Hammond. And so I think they'd reverted back to playing a lot of that kind of 60s, 70s blues, rock, soul repertoire, but in, their sort of post-retirement gigging sort of life, I think Dad had traded the Hammond for a ukulele or a half-size guitar because it's a little bit easier to move
much
around.
Better
lug.
Yeah.
But I think the other thing, because Mum and Dad were classically trained, I think the thing that, looking back at it, where we probably benefited from that is just the practice routine of having if a kid just starts guitar but their parents don't have any musical knowledge, practice doesn't really happen that much just through my experience being like a private tutor.
Yeah,
I think
sure.
like a lot of the time, because I also play tuba, my mum was like, you need to do your 40 minutes tuba practice, like, when I was in year 7. And I hated it. Like, it's the last thing I wanted to do was practice tuba on a Tuesday afternoon. And then, I had to do. But it's that kind of like, it's the routine and the habits, I think, which like, it would be hard to have obtained that if our parents weren't musical. So, we're just very fortunate to have had that kind of setup. And when I have children, I'd like to do the same kind of thing,
It just means that there was assistance available. I mean, of course, this is before YouTube existed. So,
Yeah.
I know that there would be times where I would have a guitar lesson and there was a concept that perhaps was a little bit beyond me, but I didn't have to wait a whole week before I could ask a question or address it. I could sort of ask my parents, like, oh, what do you mean by like compound time, or what exactly is like the key signature for this? And they'll go, oh, it's just that, and they would explain it. And I mean, it was a double-edged sword. So you would be practicing scales or something, and mum would be maybe cutting up tomatoes, and she'd be like, that's not D major, it has a C sharp in it. So you couldn't get away with anything. But it also meant that you learnt your key signatures, you learnt your scales, and you just got a very thorough musical education.
That's cool. So, Jai, you're saying tuba and guitars were the main starting point for you? Yeah.
Totally, man. Yeah. It's, so for the tuba, I've started that halfway through year 5. And then for the guitar, I started that, I think, in year 4. And then I actually didn't study guitar. I studied the tuba, and I got a master's on the tuba from Sydney Con,
Awesome.
which isn't a degree that you hear about too much.
No. You're the first one on the Guitar Speak podcast, actually. I'm pretty sure. I'll check.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure.
I'll probably be the last one too.
That's cool, man.
But yeah, so it's kind of like that was, an interesting avenue to go into. Like, and a lot of people are like, oh, why are you doing that? Like, and initially I wanted to join like a big orchestra in Europe and play tuba in, Berlin or, Munich or something like that, playing the German orchestra. But then I just came to the realization that that's not actually really what I wanted to do. I wanted to be, I wanted to play country music and blues and rock, like, but and that's why I didn't end up pursuing the orchestral path after my studies.
Okay. Yeah.
So took a detour.
Yeah. How about you, Zane? What was the early instruments?
It's only ever been guitar.
Okay.
I was born in 86, I think, which would have been the zenith of the guitar and popular culture. And so my earliest memories of music and just pop culture from when I was, 3 or 4, would be turning on Rage and seeing Guns N' Roses film clips or Nirvana. And Dad would bring home music that kids were listening to at the time. So this would be the late 80s, early 90s. And there would just be like a Use Your Illusion sort of album there, or Nevermind, and just hearing it and it being one of those eureka moments, just like the opening chords of Smells Like Teen Spirit as a 5-year-old is like, wow, this, I need more of this.
Yeah.
And since there were guitars around, I would sort of pick them up, or I'd pretend on a tennis racket. And then eventually when I was 9, I think it was, my mum said, oh, would you like guitar lessons? And I was like, oh, yes, please. And so that's basically where it started. And both of us went to a great guitar teacher in Balmain, Mark Williams, who I'm sure still takes on students if you're in the Balmain area.
Nice.
And he was just great. Like, we got along really well with him. He was an old friend of Mum and Dad's from back when they used to gig in Balmain, when there was a really great live music scene in Balmain. And he was very good at just making it fun. It was the highlight of the week, going to a guitar lesson on a Friday afternoon. It was better than playing soccer. Yeah. It was better than going to a friend's house, because Mark just made it fun.
Yeah, he'd give you... Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, and he was also the person who really instilled the concept of being versatile. He would just, in a very casual way, say, oh, check out this style or check out this guitar player, with no expectation, or wouldn't force you to be into it. And then I know for myself, and I think Joe's probably similar. You'd listen to them and go, wow, that's amazing, you know.
Yeah.
I want to hear more of that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where it started for me.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, which our first teacher was really good at, it's just kind of like instilling from an early age, like if you want to be a professional musician, you're not always going to be playing stuff that you want to be playing, you know, like, and his classic quote was, "I'm crying all the way to the bank," you know, because like some people, like, you know, I've had like a bunch of professional musicians say to me, "Oh, you can't be a professional musician and teach guitar," and like I just take it. I'm just like, whatever. And I'm just like, man, I'm just a smart professional musician that knows that they need to pay rent and they also want to live a good lifestyle. Yeah. And, you know, I don't get into the argument. I just like, I'm like, yeah, cool, man, that's fine. And that they're entitled to that opinion. But I'm just like, it's all about being versatile. And like, you know, half the gigs that I do or recordings I do wouldn't be things that I'd write myself. But like, I do understand that, you know, like, it's a job, you know what I mean? And you put in integrity and passion and love into everything you do, even if it's not something that you'd choose to do yourself. You know what I mean? It's like that, being a professional, like being a tradie, like you turn up to the job, you get the job done. You know, of course you don't want to be changing washers, but like, you know, you do it with detail and professionalism. And that's kind of like what our teacher told us to, you know?
Yeah, awesome. That's such a key, especially in the current climate or the climate of the last 10, 20 years that you guys have grown up into and started working to, you know, to make a living as a musician.
Yeah.
You've got to have a lot of plates spinning.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the 1% people on the front of the Guitar Player magazine.
I know, man.
I feel like, you know, we were kind of sold a lie. Because, you know, growing up in the 80s and the 90s, you did see evidence, like records were still king, you know, the internet and downloading wasn't a thing. So people, if you got an advance for a record company, it was a lot of money. And if you sold 1 million records, that wasn't 1 million streams. It was like 1 million times $29, which you got a portion of, but it's still a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so the people that were of the generation above us or of our parents' generation used to talk about like, oh, you know, teaching. We don't teach. We just play 7 nights a week. The money's great. There's heaps of gigs. The pokies weren't a thing.
Yeah.
And then gradually as we got closer to being, you know, like legal adults so we could go and play in bars, there was just like no gigs.
Yeah.
The guitar wasn't a thing anymore in popular music because the Britneys had gone through. And now you get to this sort of, you know, there's still this romantic notion of like living in, you know, Hollywood Hills and just playing in a rock band and like trying to be like Slash. But, you know, you've got to have a finger in a whole bunch of different pies in order to actually just survive in such an expensive city.
Yeah.
It's not that rock and roll.
No, all that stuff. All the above. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why I love seeing what you guys are doing. You're incredible musicians. You've worked so hard to make the most of your talents, and then to see you guys making a living and doing some really interesting stuff, I just think it's the best. So,
thank you.
Congratulations to you both for still being able to buy food and feed children and all the stuff you're doing.
Totally, man. It's not easy in Sydney.
Zane, you went on to, you both studied at the Conservatorium. Zane, you did your PhD there with Matthew Heinsohn. In fact, this is where I first became aware of you. I heard you on the music show, the ABC music show with Andrew Ford, which was the first and original sort of podcast that I got hooked on. And I loved his writing as well.
It's great.
Yeah.
But tell me about your area of the main focus of your PhD, Zane.
So I was on the role of the electric guitar in contemporary art music, and I arrived at that topic. So the backstory to getting there was when I was about, I guess, 11, I think my parents could see the writing on the wall that I love music so much, I love the guitar, that there was a high likelihood I'd want to study at a tertiary level. But only being able to sort of improvise and play like, you know, mid-century American genres of music, there weren't a lot of avenues to study at a tertiary level other than jazz. If you wanted to go down the university sort of course route, private colleges. So they said I should get classical guitar lessons, which I did, and I fell in love with the classical guitar and had a very thorough classical education. And then I got to, year 12, finished my HSC, and I auditioned for the con as a classical guitarist, and I also auditioned in the jazz course. And I got in, and I selected to be a classical guitar major because it meant that you got, I guess, a schooling in 1,000 years of musical history, harmony, and the like.
Okay.
And then I took my jazz units as well. And so I did, jazz improvisation, arrangement, played in the different bands. And then when I was in first year, my classical guitar teacher, Greg Pickler, who was the head of guitar there for about 35 years, said that there was a composer who was from Luxembourg, who happens to be in the Sydney Symphony Orchestra, a guy called Georges Lentz, who wanted to just meet up with a classical guitar player who had knowledge of the electric guitar. And would I be interested? And I said, yeah, sure. Why not? And we met up, and he said, look, I want to write this really big piece, but I don't know a lot about the electric guitar. It's quite confusing coming from a violin background. Can you help me sort of navigate just some of the idiosyncrasies of the instrument, how to notate for it, and just the concepts of pedals and amps? And we sort of ended up collaborating for about 2 years, and he wrote this enormous guitar piece called Ingwe, which is like 60 minutes of unaccompanied electric guitar.
Yeah.
And that's how I ended up in the contemporary classical world. I was already in the classical world. And it meant that I got to sort of play in Europe a bunch of times at some festivals and got to play with orchestras because there are not a lot of electric guitarists who can read or follow a conductor.
Yep.
And then when I finished, when I finished my undergraduate degree, I had thought I would like to go on and do a PhD. And I really love the music of J.S. Bach, but finding an angle on his stuff is very difficult these days. And so I thought, there's not a lot of stuff about the contemporary electric guitar in classical music. And that is how I arrived at that topic. And so I looked at how it actually became an instrument that was used in contemporary classical music, in the sort of post-war European musical scene. I did interviews with, I think it was like 50 composers about their experience. Wow. So there were 3 or 4 sections of my thesis. And the ultimate goal is to have, I guess, a manual that composers can go to. So, George and I were lucky that we were in the same city and we could just meet up on a Saturday for a couple of, years. But not every composer is going to have that. So hopefully now with my thesis, they can go and read the advice of other composers. They can hear about my experience with George, my advice to them, and that's essentially what my thesis is.
Okay, awesome. I think you're definitely adding to the literature to coin the academic phrase. That's fantastic.
I hope so.
Yeah, man. I had Joseph Tambua on the show a couple of episodes ago, a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you know Joseph. He's doing a PhD out at WSU. And he's an electric guitarist, rock background, but has gone into the art world as well. And he's looking at intersections between minimalism and oceanic music because he's got a part Fijian heritage.
Right.
And I was asking him, I said, do you think there's enough research on the electric guitar in art music? And the first thing he says was, you should check out Zane Banks' work. So I'll ask you the same question, Zane. Is there enough research?
No, not at all. But I think when I finished my doctorate in 2013, and when I started, which was 5 years prior to that, there were like 6 PhDs published on the topic.
Wow.
And they, there were a few that sort of looked at very specific sections of, like, it might be a piece that involved the electric guitar.
Okay.
There wasn't anything that had an overview of the instrument. So it was wonderful in the sense that, like, one of the hardest things when running a PhD is the whole point is to contribute to knowledge and to literature.
Yeah.
So if you're going to do something on Bach or Beethoven, in which there's thousands of PhDs over the last, 200 years, you would have to find something really, really specific about, the interpretation of, appoggiaturas in late Bach and what that means in his secular vocal music. But with this topic, there was nothing. So you could just basically pick whatever you wanted to do. The only problem is you had to create the source material.
Okay,
so you've got to go and interview people, and then you've got to analyze the interviews, which is really fascinating but very time consuming. So it was like 2 years of doing exactly what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Except getting up at 2:00 in the morning to interview, a Dutch composer.
The time.
And
the
then
time
go
zones,
through. Exactly. And analyze it using sort of, I guess, things that they use in psychology, where you're very careful about the type of questions that you ask, so you're not leading the answer. Letting the research speak. And it was great. I'd love to do, if I had the time right now, I would love to do another PhD.
Awesome, man. I guess so. The idea of the literature review for you was non-existent.
Yeah, there wasn't much.
Wow, amazing.
There's even less though on the tuba.
Tell me your story, Joe. What happened with? So you had your masters with a tuba focus.
Yeah. So it's similar to Zane, kind of like but like on a different instrument. I kind of followed a similar trajectory. So I did an honors degree where I had to write a thesis on the tuba, and I did my honors thesis was done on the tuba repertoire. So it was kind of like only had to be 10,000 words. It was like pretty short when it comes to like a thesis.
Sure.
It ended up being about 30,000 words just because that's just what happens. So that wasn't like really groundbreaking. It was just kind of looking at repertoire that was out there and parallels between them, like concertos and, why the tuba hadn't been written for, and a lot of history on the tuba. But then my master's thesis, that was a lot more interesting because I had, like, my scope was a lot bigger. And it looked at the emerging Australian tuba sound. And just like, it actually relates to the guitar too. But like with the tuba, with Australia, because we're such a young country, where it's like, we always pride ourselves on being multicultural because, like, what is Australian at the end of the day? Like, it's not uniquely American or uniquely British. It's just like, we've got Korean, Japanese, Italian, like, it's a melting pot. And we're not very set in our tradition. There's not an Australian tradition. So with the Australian tuba sound, unlike the German tuba sound or the American tuba sound or the British tuba sound, performers can really do whatever they want. They can have, their influences can be from, 3 different cultures. And that actually really changes how our orchestras sound, and it changes like ensembles and like in so many different approaches, like, because the German tradition is so strong and you can only use certain tubas when you play in Germany. Mm-hmm. And in England, it's the same way. But here it's like we put it all together. It's a massive mash.
Wow.
And yeah, it's kind of like talking about, is there an Australian voice for the tuba?
That's a really blank slate as well then, similar to, I guess, Zane's experience.
Yeah, definitely, man. Cool. Yeah, it's well, it had never been done before, this research, and I don't know, probably only 3 or 4 people have read it since I've done it, but whatever. I had fun doing it, and I had to do all these recitals playing, an hour on the tuba, which is incredibly hard.
Yeah.
Not only is it just like learning an hour's worth of like, repertoire, but it's very tiring playing the tuba. Kind of like stamina wise, it's like you need to, it's like being a marathon runner, but with your mouth. You've got to be practicing 7 hours a day. And if you don't do that, you won't perform. Like, you won't get through it. So it's but yeah, that's kind of my that's my academic journey.
So how do you end up shredding on a pedal steel? Where does this?
It was an ultimatum.
Yeah. I'll let you tell this story. Okay. Zane loves this.
Yeah.
Quite proud.
We love country music, and our parents liked country music, so it was on. We grew up around it, and the pedal steel wasn't something new.
Yeah.
But and I'd wanted to play the pedal steel for a while, and I remember being in the US, I don't know, 15 years ago, and I bought, like a Carter starter, which is like the Squier Strat.
Okay.
Tinkered a little bit on it, but I have such a sort of obsessive perfectionist kind of personality that I know that if I really get into something, like, that's it. I just everything else, the sort of tunnel vision comes out.
Yeah.
And so I spent a couple of weeks really working on the steel, and then just stepped back because I didn't want to, let all of the guitar practice I'd done over the years just go. And so I sat there kind of collecting dust. But this was about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, when country music was really starting to make a resurgence globally, but in urban areas, whereas before you would just sort of like, apologetically, or you wouldn't tell someone you like country music.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's cool, to be a country music fan. And Jai and I were in Montreal, and he was looking at buying a secondhand Subaru WRX.
Yeah.
And I was like, that is just such a waste of your money. Like, you buy the WRX, you don't know what it's like buying a secondhand car.
Yeah.
And I said, if you really want to get, a return on your money, buy a good pedal steel. You know how to play the guitar. You've got the aptitude to teach yourself how to do it. There's no one doing it. Like, there's Michelle Rose, who's the the king of the pedal steel, and I guess the Southern Hemisphere, and a few other guys, Tommy Grasso, Damien Odell, but they're really spread out, and some of them have full-time jobs that are not in the music industry. So you're a young guy. There's lots of young artists who need a pedal steel player. Do it. And basically, didn't buy the WRX, got an Emmons Lashley Legrand 2 or whatever they're called, and the gigs just haven't stopped. So you can thank me later, Jai.
Yeah, no, I've already thought thanks you many times, but thanks again.
That is very good brotherly advice, I got to say.
Yeah, exactly.
It means that I get to live vicariously through him as a frustrated steel guitarist.
Oh, man, that's nice. That's super nice.
Yeah, probably wouldn't be alive if I got the WRX. I would have wrapped myself around a tree.
It's possible. Actually, I saw on Instagram you got a nice blue, kind of 4-wheel drive thing now.
Oh, yeah, Subaru too.
A Subaru, nice, congrats. Yeah, you kept it Subaru.
It's not a WRX, but it's a family car because we're expecting a little boy.
Man. That's awesome.
Oh, thanks, man.
That's awesome. I saw that too on Insta. It's weird meeting you today, but I already know you're expecting. But
yeah,
that's
totally,
that's how we're living. But that's cool, man. Good on you. And there's room for a console and a baby seat in that kind of car.
Exactly. Yes, it's very practical. Yeah.
Jai, what were the mechanics? So you knew guitar, but pedal steel's another world. When you mentioned Michelle Rose, probably about, 10, 12 years ago, I was lucky enough to sit in on a session he was playing, and it just blew my tiny mind. It was all hands and feet and knees. I didn't know there were knees involved. Jai, how did you get across that?
Well, I destroyed a relationship doing it. That's that's probably the most important thing.
Which is why I didn't do it, right? I'm still happily married. Yeah. So I'll take you through the journey, man. So it's kind of like you get a steel, and it's kind of like, the basic foundation of pedal steel is you have pedals and you have knee levers. So on my guitar, I have 10 pedals, which are operated by your left foot. Mm-hmm. And those pedals raise and lower the pitch of strings by a semitone or a tone.
Okay.
So that's all operated by your left foot. So for all of you listening, maybe just imagine that, like maybe shut your eyes and be like, okay, left foot is operating 8 pedals.
I'm already dizzy.
What's that, man?
I'm already dizzy. Just
yeah, totally. Right. Well, get ready. You're going to get very dizzy. And then the right foot operates your volume pedal or your swell pedal.
Of course, that's vital, yeah.
And that is like half of the instrument. Without a swell pedal, the instrument is not what it just doesn't sound like a pedal steel. So that's what your feet are doing. Okay. Then your knees, on both of your knees, I've got 10 knee levers on my guitar. So if you put your left knee left, you'll raise your E strings to an F. So that's if you're sitting like in the backwards position. But if you're sitting in a forward position, you'll hit another knee lever, which will lower your G sharps to a G, and then it would lower them to an F sharp. So there's like, with your left leg going left, you can change 2 different strings. Okay, and then on top of that, you have 2 vertical knee levers. So if you push your leg up, your left leg up, you can go from a chord 4 major to a chord 4 minor, and you can also drop your second string as well. Okay, so that's just the left foot left and vertically. Then there's left foot right. So I won't take you through all of it because it's just a bit boring. But
I think the important thing, sorry to jump in here, Joe, to mention for, like, say, guitar players who might be used to the concepts of like a lap steel or a slide guitar, like what you see John Butler do on his lap, is that, you know, if you're playing just with a slide or with a bar slide, it's essentially just like playing with one finger, like in drop D.
Yeah.
And, you know, if you look at a bar chord, you have one finger, but then the other fingers come up and they get the other notes. If you play on a lap steel, you're in an open tuning, but you can only get that major chord. You can't change it. And so the pedals were actually, the concept was borrowed from an orchestral harp, which only has open strings, but there are 7 pedals on an orchestral harp that have 3 positions with sharp, neutral, and flat. And so what our fingers would do on the guitar playing a bar chord, you know, your middle finger, your ring finger, and your pinky, that's what you would use pedals and knee levers for in order to do that stuff.
Wow, man.
Yeah.
So when you think about it like that, you're just using your pedals to do what fingers would do. It makes sense.
Yeah.
But if you try to give someone a lesson on the steel and you read out the spiel of what Jai did, it is, you know, like, it's the equivalent of just reciting huge prime numbers or pi or something. It's like, you know, pure math. It's so abstract and confronting that people go, I'm not going to bother. But when you do start to get into that world of, I'm playing this chord, but I really want to make it a minor chord. How do I do that? Oh, well, if I had a pedal and that would just lower that note, or if I had a lever that would raise it, and it's just evolved to being this beast of an instrument.
Wow.
So it as Zane said, that's the function of it. So on top of that, so you got your pedals and your knee levers. You got 10 knee levers. Both legs go left and right and vertically.
Wow.
And then you play with metallic finger picks. So you get like a really nice kind of metallic bright sound, which kind of cuts through in the EQ. And then you play with the tone bar, which is like it looks like a cannon. It's like a slide, so like a cylindrical kind of it's not quite like a bottleneck, but if you type in pedal steel slide to Google, you'll have a pretty good idea of what it looks like. So it's just like the first 2 years you want to give up every day, like literally it's just like, I don't know why I'm doing this. I'm not getting anywhere. It's just so much slow practice, and like physically it's not that hard, like, to start off with, because you're not trying to play fast, but it's just mentally so demanding. I think one of my friends summed it up perfectly. Another steel player said, playing the pedal steel is like flying a helicopter backwards with a blindfold on through a tunnel. And still it's just like, it's all about slow practice and just not getting frustrated. Like, I don't know how I committed myself to it, because usually, I don't know, like, I lose interest in stuff pretty quickly, but I must really like it, I suppose.
Oh, man, you wail on that thing. I think it's unreal, man. It's so cool. You've, is that the right word, by the way, when describing
the console? Yeah. So, to be honest, like, you wouldn't want to quote me on this, but like, with the console, as far as I'm concerned, like, aware, like, consoles are kind of like, they're like lat steels and they've kind of got legs and that kind of thing.
Oh,
And
okay.
like
Okay.
yeah, as I said, don't quote me on it. I'm not too up on it, but I would imagine my steel would be considered a console as well.
Sure.
But I don't know, man. I need to look into that.
Hey, you've got twin necks on yours.
Yeah. Yes.
What are the how many strings on each, and what tunings do you have?
Good point. So the breadwinner is the E9 neck, which is the front neck.
Uh-huh.
So both necks have 10 strings, and it's tuned to an E9. So you've got like a whole bunch of suspensions happening within the tuning, and every string can be raised and lowered somehow.
Yeah, wow.
And the back neck, the way of playing the back neck is slightly different to playing the front neck. It's kind of like it's tuned to C6, so it's much more fitting for kind of Western swing and Hawaiian music. And it kind of like you use that neck very differently with the pedals. So with the E9 neck, it's kind of like everything can be just like changed with the knee levers and the pedals. But with the C6 neck, it's kind of like you'll put down one pedal and then that will change the voicing to like an augmented chord. And then you can play any of those 10 notes and it'll work. But with the E9 neck, it's just tuned differently, and your approach to playing it, it's a total different instrument.
Wow.
I think for guitar players who are used to just 6 strings, E, A, D, G, B, E,
Yeah.
the thing that is very confusing about the E neck, the Nashville neck, is that it's not tuned low to high.
Yeah.
So the highest string is the 3rd string.
Yeah.
And
Oh, man.
although, yeah, right?
Yeah.
And although Jai's saying like, oh, it's tuned to an E9,
Yeah.
us guitar players think it must just be tuned like dadgad, right? Like there's your E9 chord, I can strum all the strings.
Yeah.
But it's tuned to chromatic E9, which means that the overwhelming majority of notes in the open strings fit into an E9 chord. But you also do have a major 7th in there. You have a D sharp and a few extra notes like that enable you to sort of have more harmonic options. So if you strum the open strings of an E9 chord, it just sounds like this cluster of notes.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like an E9 at all.
So it's not like James Brown all night long.
Yeah. Totally, man.
That's a shame.
But yeah, so that's pretty much like it in a nutshell. And then you've got to make it sound like fluid and not jarring, like getting your pedals and your knee levers to work together. So while one pedal is coming up, at the same time you're putting a knee lever down, while your right foot is squeezing the volume pedal and your right leg is then adjusting another knee lever while trying to play in tune with the tone bar and picking the right grip with your right hand. So it's just like that at any one time there's like 6 things happening.
Yeah, wow. How long does it take you to set up for a gig?
Well, I remember when I first got it would take, 15 minutes, and like I'd get distracted because people would come over and ask questions about it. And then, so I used to get to gigs an hour before so I could like have a drink and, just like set up. But now I can set it up in about 3 minutes.
Wow.
And pack it down even quicker. But they are heavy. My pedal steel in the flight case is like 42 kilograms.
Okay, that'll do it.
So it's not fun to fly with.
Killer, man. You must have a good trolley.
It's got casters, fortunately, man. And but I'm not at the level where I have a roadie, so it's all done by me.
Sure. Zane, I see you blasting on a lot of guitars, mainly a Telecaster with Bardens. Is that your main guitar?
Yeah, that's number one.
Tell me about that.
I just feel like a Telecaster is the most versatile guitar there is for the kind of music that I play. I mean, I love all types of electric. I love Malmsteen and that kind of, but I don't play that kind of music. And so the world that I exist in is straight up jazz and its variations, straight up blues and its variations, straight up country music and its variations, and then rockabilly, and maybe a little bit into sort of classic kind of rock. And I just find that, if I'm going to be going to a gig and I don't know if I'm going to get a park right outside the venue, I want to just bring one guitar. And I find that the Telecaster can do that. It sounds fantastic as a jazz guitar, whereas like I don't think, for me anyway, like Strats just have never really cut it as jazz guitars. They just sound too much like Strats. Whereas, the Telecaster, it's the iconic sound for country music. It can sound really funky if you've got to do something that's a bit more Motown or Stevie Wonder. It's great for rock music. And I found that the one problem I just had with Telecasters is that the pickups sometimes can be a bit thin and they can be really penetrating. It can just be like nails going through you. Whereas the Barden pickups, there's this added depth and beef to it. They're also hot rails, so they're very high output and they're super quiet. So, we did, when was it? About 5 weeks ago, we did a gig when our lockdown started to ease. And it was pretty loud. Like I had a deluxe reverb on 7. Wow. So it sounded like a tube screamer naturally. And the guitar was just quiet. I mean, as soon as I took my hands off the strings, it would just start to feedback at that level, but there was no audible hum.
Okay. So
it's a testament to the pickups. So, when it comes to Tele pickups, I wouldn't use anything else.
Yeah.
And what's
got the pop?
Yeah, man. And what's the Tele? It looks like a 50s reissue or...
Yeah, yep. That's all it is. Just a 50s sort of custom shop. I've modded it a bit. So I, it's got like a nitro sort of finish, which is great because it's really starting to wear and age, and the lacquer has come off the back of the neck, and it is starting to get like fret wear like you would get on those old guitars.
Yeah, nice.
I had the tuners replaced. So I've got, I think they're like Goto vintage Kluson style tuners with the rolling wheel pincers. On the front, they just look like vintage Tele ones. I hate how, you get with old Teles, you got to put the string in the top.
Yes.
And then it can pop out. So this one is just a bit better, holds its tuning. Another thing I find with Telecasters that is off-putting is the way they have the ashtray bridge plate.
Okay.
With the walls. You know how there's like a wall on 3 sides of the bridge in a traditional Tele? So I've got a Fender to just do a non-ashtray one. So they've shaved the wall off on either side of the pickup, which means it doesn't cut into my palm when I'm sort of palm muting. And that's it. Like I've had the electronics redone a bunch of times. I mean, I probably put close to like 60 or 70 hours a week onto that instrument. So it's, its note count and the miles I've clocked up with it, it has to be sort of repaired quite frequently.
Yeah.
Oh man. Are you guys are both working with Fender Australia? Is that true?
That's correct. Yeah, Zane.
Jai is a Fender artist. I come in and help out with things, but he's actually
okay.
Yeah. It's Zane sometimes comes in and like does some stuff with me, but So no, Fender have been amazing. Get some great stuff from them, and it's actually interesting how it all came about because a guy that I follow and he follows me on Instagram called Rick Hind, he's head of Fender amps in America, and he was really digging like my pedal steel playing.
Wow, awesome.
And then he got in touch with Heath, who's like the Fender rep in Australia.
Yeah, Heath blows. Shout out to Heath.
Heath blows. Yeah, shout out to good old Heath. And then I went in to meet Heath because I'd never met him before. And I was really interested in some of their new amps. And then, it's just kind of like now I'm doing videos for Fender, and I played at the custom shop event. Zane and I both did that. So kind of like they just look after you once you get in, like with a good company. It's kind of like you just get opportunities that you wouldn't have got before.
Nice.
And then like you just meet other artists that are with Fender. Like from that, I met Dan Sultan, and then I've done heaps of stuff with him.
Yeah, great.
Since then, which has been fun.
Yep.
But it's funny because I've like the dream as a kid was to like own a Fender Stratocaster, and now to be endorsed by them, it's just like it's a bit surreal.
Yeah, man, that's killer.
Yeah.
I saw you rocking the new amps, the new deluxes, and the twin, the lightweight ones.
Totally, man. The Tone Master range.
Yeah.
They're amazing. Oh man, it's like I was playing, like I'd borrow Zane's twin a fair bit because he's got like an actual twin, but after gigging that with that amp, it was just like, because a lot of the time I'm just playing in, bars, and you have to walk upstairs and like that stuff's backbreaking,
You've already got
twins,
that
like
42 kilo.
Totally, man.
Well, yeah.
Like it sounds great, but it's not worth it. Like, it's not worth killing your back. So the Tone Masters are just ridiculous. Like when I gig now, I only use the Tone Masters. Like it's just the sound is like it. We had an amp shootout at Fender where we were comparing the Tone Master to the actual twin and the deluxe as well, and I could not tell the difference between the two amps, and we're in a sound chamber.
Wow. Like
an isolated chamber. It's just like, I think the only thing, and I didn't realize this myself, is the Tone Master was just a tiny bit softer.
Okay.
But I didn't realize that. It's just when I looked at the dial, it's like the Tone Master was on 8 and the actual twin was on 6.
Sure. You
so
just turn it up. Yeah, cool.
There is a bit of there's more immediacy to the sound that you get with the Tone Master. With like valve technology, I mean, it's still instantaneous, but it just feels like when you're playing, if you're going to strum a chord, like you just hear it instantly. Whereas with a valve one, there's maybe several 100ths of a second response time.
Yeah.
But I've done a number of gigs on these amps as well, and they sound super clean. I think, if you're in the studio and you're trying to sound like Stevie Ray Vaughan, then still go ahead and use your super reverbs and everything. But at a gig, when it only weighs 10 kilograms and you're going to be put in the mix with the rest of the band, no one is going to know, and it's a fantastic sound.
Yeah, nice. Was that the deluxe you had on 7 the other night, Zane?
That was a real valve deluxe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it was pretty loud.
And I had the Tone Master twin working that night.
Okay.
But it's got an attenuator in it, so you can, you can like dial in 2 watts, so you can like get it to break up like crazy.
Man, that's killer. That's
yeah.
Very cool. Hey, can we talk about Cruise and Juices? Because that's you guys are doing so many projects everywhere. This is one of the ones you guys do together, and also the Banks brothers, which I'd like to chat about too. But is Cruise and Juices? First question: is it a Danny Gatton reference? The band name
sure is.
Nice.
Yeah, 10 points.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, you got the Bardens, you got the Telly.
Yeah.
It's all coming together. And give me the backstory of that band and the focus.
About the band?
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I did the sound cut up for a second. We started about, I don't know, six years ago, I think.
Yeah.
For just the simple reason of we were, I guess myself, I was a hired gun and I loved playing for people. We'd just come back from Tamworth where we were doing a lot of work for people who were signed to Universal. Mm-hmm. And while it's great playing with, all of the killer players that are up there and the Universal artists, there were just so many songs and repertoire choices that I wanted to make that you have no control over when you're just brought in to do a session. And so I was like, well, I'll just start my own band. I want to play at that time up at Tamworth and in the sort of Australian, I guess even the American country music scene, there wasn't a lot of more traditional kind of country music. That's the stuff that I really love, anything from the 30s up to the mid 60s. And I wasn't interested in creating a museum piece band that did it super authentic. I just wanted to play that kind of stuff in my own way. And I know that Jai, likes that stuff as well. I mean, he's really into the sort of 70s, 80s, 90s kind of country music as well. But we just put the band together and with a bunch of friends who love that kind of stuff. and found that there was a really good response to it because people didn't have access to live music that was that kind of repertoire.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the other thing that we started initially doing rockabilly and traditional honky tonk. And in Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane, there's a very big rock and roll rockabilly community. So I think when we're in Sydney or any capital city, we tend to play more rockabilly because there's just a really big dance community. So everyone will come out with their Chevrolets and they pump their hair up.
Yeah.
And it's just great playing music that we want to play. And it's sort of led into the Banks Brothers is more of a stripped down original kind of project because, you know, if we're playing a rockabilly festival, while we have written a bunch of rockabilly tunes, we tend to just play the hits so people can dance to it. Yeah. And with the Banks Brothers, it means that we can write stuff or do things that's slightly more intimate, not necessarily dictated by being at a dance beat.
Yeah.
So, you know, we could do an arrangement of a song, or we could bring in some friends and just do more of an alt country Americana thing or a blues sound. So there's just a little bit more freedom. Yeah. I guess the Cruising Juices have become so well known. Well, not so well known, but they've become known
in the
for
scene.
A very particular thing.
Sure.
That the success of that band has almost meant that, like, you know, you have to go there and you have to give the audience what they want, which is great. But I just get restless. So, you know, you know, as soon as I have one thing, like, oh, it's time to do more bluegrass or time to play more bebop, and Banks Brothers facilitates a little bit of that.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And from the Banks Brothers, like, we've led into another kind of new outfit, which is Michael Carpenter and the Banks Brothers.
Yeah, you've just released a tune, Honky Tonka.
That's it, man.
Nice,
it's and oh man, we're actually doing an album right now. We've just almost finished tracking 12 tunes.
That's cool.
We did it in two like 5-hour sessions in the studio. We just smashed it out. Awesome. And there's some really, really exciting stuff happening there. It's it's mainly Michael and Zane songwriting, but it's just like 90s country, traditional country, bluegrass, all with like our own inflection. Kind of like pedal steel plays throughout, like it's part of the texture. It's not just like a featured texture. It's like it's like the acoustic guitar is now the pedal steel. So it's just like, and then it has time to like showcase, you know, like in solos and that. But we're doing something, I don't know, we're not doing something like really different, but we've definitely got our own spin on it, which sounds like all of our personalities. Like you can tell it's my playing, you can tell it's Zane's playing, you can tell Michael's playing and singing. Like it's like a fresh take on country music.
Nice. Now, Michael Carpenter, he's from Love Hurts Studio. Is that the same guy? Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
And what a great studio. I see pictures and the guitars on the walls. And
it's the best. I live 2 minutes away from it. So
okay.
You know, I hang out there all the time. I love it.
That's great. That's so cool.
Michael's the most talented, well-rounded person I know. Like there is not anything he cannot do in a creative field. You know, like it's amazing. Like, you know, whether it be like, you know, like doing a film clip or whatever, or it's like playing upright bass. It's just like in his studio, like you get that vibe where like anything's possible. In some studios, it's like a very safe kind of vibe. It's like, which is good, but it's kind of like, you know what you're there to do. It's like, just do your job. But in Michael's, it's like, I'll have a stupid idea, like blah, 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 blah. And then Michael's like, amazing, let's do it.
Nice.
You know? And it was just like, I mean, half the time it's rubbish, you know, but half the time it's incredible. And that's the being a creative, you know, you got to try everything.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Very cool. What is there a scheduled release date for the album?
Oh, look, COVID keeps interfering with it.
Sure.
You know, we were going to. It sort of all came about after Tamworth at the beginning of the year, where Michael, I think he'd been venturing more and more into traditional country music, but like us, didn't want to do something that was like a a tribute band or a museum piece.
Sure.
And so asked us if we wanted to do a joint record, to which we'd be like, yeah, great.
Yeah.
And we started doing a lot of prep for it. And then in about mid-March, everything shut down. And we could still exchange ideas online, but we had planned to go into the studio and track everything in like April, which obviously didn't happen.
Sure, yeah.
And with the easing of restrictions, we sort of got together, last week and just tracked all of the. Basically, we had guide guitars and vocals, and then we tracked as a trio live. So live pedal steel. I just had live Telecaster, just straight into a twin reverb, and Michael played bass.
Yeah.
And so, although there will be some overdubs to the record, there's that sort of immediate live sound. We didn't listen, we didn't rehearse anything. We just put the track on, did about 5 or 6 takes, complete takes, and that's it.
Okay, right.
And so that's why it's kind of traditional, and it's not, for anyone who's not as familiar with recordings, most albums are not made that way these days.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So, exactly. So now it's like, I've got to do vocals and we've got backing vocals, but with this looming second lockdown, I just don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll find out. Hopefully by the end of the year. That's the short answer.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. That's cool. Yeah, well, we'll definitely keep our eyes and ears out for that. That sounds cool. Any we probably need to wrap up soon, but any other things going on that the good people should know about?
I think probably something that I'm doing, which is like kind of left of center on the steel. Like I constantly recording with different artists and that kind of thing, which is like a lot of fun, but it's normal. It's kind of what you would expect from a pedal steel. But I'm doing, I'm collaborating with Julian Day, who's an Australian composer and ABC radio announcer.
Yeah.
And now he lives in New York, and he wants to write me a solo pedal steel piece.
Oh wow, that's awesome!
So
He's
which is really.
Yeah, no, I didn't know he was in New York. I knew of him when he was in Sydney, and he's got the most beautiful radio voice.
Oh, totally,
ever.
man. Yeah. It's so soothing. I wish I had it.
Sorry to interject.
His voice.
Just that guy. Hey, and what's the story? What's the piece? What's happening?
So far we've exchanged quite a few emails, and we've had a video conference together. And so as it is, I've just kind of talked him through the operations of the pedal steel. Like it's in its very early days, but just kind of like it'll be very avant-garde, very, very like contemporary classical music.
Yeah. Cool.
And we've actually got some pretty big plans as far as the contemporary classical scene goes. We're not going to be charting with it. Billboard might put us at number 2. We won't get number 1. No, we definitely won't get anything like that. But yeah, like we'll be doing probably a video clip to it,
Awesome.
like an art kind of. Like not a traditional video clip, but we'll be recording it in a space, and it's very exciting. And I'm doing like a classical piece for pedal steel, which I've started, which is for like a small chamber group.
Okay.
And
wow.
So it's coming along. But apart from all the usual stuff, that's the weird stuff I'm doing.
Great. Oh man, sounds so fun. Keep us up to date, man. That's great.
Very
Yeah, cool.
Thanks, Fed.
And how about you, Zane? I guess the like you were saying, the Banks Brothers record's going to be
that's been great. With the sort of lockdown, it's been difficult because I've a 20-month-old daughter, and so gigging. I haven't actually been able to do a lot of playing when we were in proper lockdown. It was just getting through a day was an achievement for anyone who has small children.
Yeah, yep. Remember it well.
But the thing, exactly. And I've really missed playing. Actually, I was supposed to have a gig on Friday night, but again, with the looming lockdown, it's just been cancelled.
Oh, wow.
So the thing that I've sort of been doing, just I guess to keep myself interested in terms of playing and also to help out the guitar community, is I mean, YouTube, as we all know, is such a phenomenal resource.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish I had access to it when I was a kid. And so what I've been doing is just creating free guitar lessons on a wide sort of scope of topics, everything from how to solo in block chord jazz harmonies through to how to bend in tune or vibrato, and just putting them up on YouTube, essentially under the premise of creating videos that I wish I had access to when I was a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I used to have to go around to all of the old secondhand bookshops and find guitar player magazines from the 80s, or talk to, you know, guitar players, or sneak into bars and watch them play and then get kicked out. So I've just been creating this sort of free stuff and putting it up there on the internet, and, you know, sometimes you get a comment, people like it, but that's been really, really nice. It's a bit like what Jai was saying with the thesis. You know, you write it, you put it out there, you don't know if anyone watches it.
Yeah.
But just trying to create a catalog of, you know, like a 5-part lesson series on how to create bebop jazz lines over dominant 7th chords, or understanding the caged system. So if anyone wants to look at that stuff, it's all there. Zane Banks on YouTube, or Instagram, the Rev Dr. Z. It's free, and it's to help out guitar players.
Great. I'll put links in all the show notes too, because you've both got heaps of cool stuff on your social media. Jai, have you launched your website yet?
Oh, yeah, man. So that's launching on Friday.
Nice.
So it's pretty much ready to go. It's just a couple of little glitches I'm ironing out, but that's been a lot of fun. I've got testimonials from Troy Casadale, and some other big acts, like producers and engineers. So that's kind of good, just to, you know, if people haven't heard of me, they can find out, you know, well, they might think I'm a hack still, but, you know, we'll see. It's all there. I've got some good media on there. And it's funny because, like, these days, a lot of my traffic is through, like, Instagram and Facebook, but people keep telling me I need a website for when, you know, I start applying for, you know, festivals for myself, because they're like, you know, you need to have, you know, on many different platforms, you know, your YouTube and your website. So that's something that I've learned over the last few months, is just not having everything invested on one platform.
Sure.
Okay.
Cool. Awesome. Well, man, you guys, you're killing it. I love it. I love that you're doing a lot of stuff together. You got your own, obviously your own work with other bands and stuff going on as well. It's cool. And you're just, a real gift to the guitar community in Australia. Absolutely. So congratulations on what you've done so far. And
thank you.
Man,
thanks so much, man.
No, it's great to talk to you guys. And wish you all continued success with this, and we'll be following very closely.
Thanks for listening
to very much.
To what we have to say, man. It's very nice.
All right, there you go. Zane and Jai Banks, 2 guitar players doing some fantastic stuff right now. Please check out the links in the show notes to both Zane and Jai's respective websites, also the Cruise and Juices website. And if you jump on that stuff and their social media, you'll be up to date with the Banks brothers and all other really great stuff going on in their worlds. Lovely to have them on the show. If you've enjoyed this episode, why not share it on your social media? That really helps me get the word out. And the PayPal tip jar is also open. There's a link to that in the show notes. Hey, thank you so much for tuning in. I love getting these interviews, these conversations together and sharing them with you. And it's really cool that people are enjoying these all over the world and tuning in. It's very, very cool. So stay safe, stay well. My name's Matt Wakeling. You've been listening to the Guitar Speak podcast, and I'll catch you next time. Bye now.